Hashem. Tonight's lesson, Bezrat Hashem, with Hashem's loving grace, we're learning our first lesson in Bitachon, and it's called Lean on Me. And I want to start with a story. This is a story, it's a fictitious story. It's a figment of my imagination, but is based on 2 or 3 episodes that really happened, 2 or 3 anecdotes or real conversations, okay? So not long ago, in the middle of COVID and everything, it was 17 days, 2.5 weeks ago, we got shot at in Ashdod. It wasn't enough with COVID. There was rockets from right down the road. It's an 18-minute drive to the Gaza border from where I live. Okay, so this is the setting. This is the setting in the middle of COVID right now, 2021, and the south of Israel. We're in a neighborhood in the south of Israel. 2 friends that haven't seen each other for a while, they encounter each other in the bomb shelter. Now, they usually meet each other all the time in synagogue, but the government's closed down the synagogues. Okay, so they either daven in the parking lot, and they live in different developments. So one davens in the parking lot, and when they go to synagogue, they go to the same synagogue. But since I've been synagogue, they haven't seen each other. So 2 friends, they encounter each other in the neighborhood bomb shelter. They hear red alarm siren, and when you hear the siren, where they live, you have 28 seconds to run to cover. 28 seconds to run to cover. You don't ask questions. You don't pass go. You don't collect $200. You go to the nearest bomb shelter. Okay, and the bomb shelters are equal opportunity bomb shelters. You've got people from all backgrounds there. You've got African Jews and Polish Jews and American Jews. That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter color. It doesn't matter anything. And have people that are non-Jews. Even some the construction part, the construction site. There's Arab workers. They're in the bomb shelter too. Okay, so these 2 friends, they encounter each other at a bomb shelter, and right when the red alert siren started to wail, and they made a sprint. Okay, break your own personal Olympic record for the sprint. So where they live, they said 28 seconds to get when you walk in the street in the south of Israel, you always have your eye, where's the nearest bomb shelter? In the back of your head. So they got in the bomb shelter, and they're both panting hard. They did a really quick 100-yard dash, and they're now safely inside the shelter. So they sit down on a wooden bench in the bomb shelter. They sit down on a wooden bench, and they wait for another 7 or 8 nerve-wracking seconds. It took about 20 seconds to get to the bomb shelter. That's another 7, 8 chins, and then wait, they count and watch, and all of a sudden they hear on the outside, poof, they hear a thud, because the explosion, it's been muted by the concrete walls, and so they figure by you feel the ground shaking under your feet. By the vibration on their feet, they said probably about a mile away. Okay, no closer, but no further away, because they felt the tremor. So they heard this thud, and then the subsequent, first comes the thud, then boom, boom, and then an explosion. And they figured, okay, the rocket's about a mile away. Thank you, Hashem. They say, thank you, Hashem. Okay, we're in the shelter. And now they have to wait for the all clear, because you don't know if there's another bomb coming in. Some people have been hurt when they get out of the shelter too fast. You have to wait for another siren. It's all clear, and you can leave. So now they're waiting for the second siren, and one looks, here's his buddy from Shul, Shimon and Reuven. They meet each other, and they say, Shimon says to Reuven, he says, wow, of all places to meet, we haven't seen each other for a while. So Reuven says, yeah, it would have been a lot nicer to meet in a synagogue, but we're on lockdown, we don't see each other. So Shimon didn't wait for Reuven to finish his sentence. He says, lockdown, and right in the middle of the sentence, lockdown, what a pain. He starts complaining. He says, it's bad enough that my shoe store is closed down. He's got a shoe store. And because of the lockdown in Israel, he can't sell shoes. And he says, now he really cares. He says, I saw other people were opening their stores. So I tried opening my store and letting people into the back door. The first day I opened my store, comes a cop in the back door and gives me a 5,000 shekel penalty. It's a ticket, 5,000 shekels. 5,000 shekels, that's maybe about $1,500. And he says, not only that, it's not enough that I don't have any income, that the shoe store is closed, and not enough that I don't know where I'm going to pay the electrical bill, and I haven't bought food for Shabbos yet. But now, bad enough, I got this 5,000 shekel penalty to pay, and I have a big argument with my wife about whether to take the vaccine or not, and the kids are home, and they're making us crazy, and it's just going on and on and on, ranting on and on. He says, man, these are really terrible times. And you go outside, you look at the government, what's happening, it's dog eat dog, and with the elections, and everybody's bad-mouthing everybody else, and you know, even here in the neighborhood, how could a cop know that the store was closed? But I was letting people in the back door. How did the cop know when the back door was open? It must have been a neighbor that he ratted on the cops. Well, Reuven leaned towards Shimon, and he said, tell me something, Shimon. Try to talk to him, try to console him a little bit. The guy's in trouble. He says, Shimon, do you believe in Hashem? He says, that's a dumb question, Reuven. Of course I believe in Hashem. We've known each other for over 15 years, and we send our kids to the same school, same yeshivas, and we go to the same shul. Well, you know me from yesterday. You don't see me myself, listen to the rabbi's sermons, and I learn Torah, and I learn Daf Yomi, I learn the Gemara every day, and you ask me a dumb question like that? Well, Reuven says to Shimon, you know something, my brother? You're contradicting yourself, because you say that you believe in Hashem, that's Emunah. And Emunah tells us that everything is from Hashem and that everything is for the best. So how come you're so uptight and angry at the world? So Shimon really is getting perturbed at his buddy here. He says, Reuven, you're talking like an imbecile with a diploma. You've got you're a certified imbecile. Rockets are exploding outside. I got no income. I got to pay a penalty. And I can argue with my wife, got no shalom bite, vaccine, no vaccine. The kids are all making us crazy. They're not learning. And you ask me, do you have Emunah? What do you tip through the toilets? It's really, there's a pandemic going on, don't you know? And look what's going on. So he finally says to him, looks at him, he says, Reuven, do you smoke something? You must be out of your head. You're out of reality. Reuven smiles at him, and he says, no, Shimon, I don't smoke anything, and I never did smoke. I take care of myself. But guess what? I'm in the same boat you are, he says with a big smile. Don't you know that I work for a travel agency? And the first ones to shut down were the travel agents, because nobody's going anywhere, and everybody's in lockdown, not just Israel, United States, Europe, everything, Far East, everything's locked down. Nobody's traveling anywhere, and the airlines are down, and I was let go long ago. So I'm on unemployment too, and I'm trying to scrape together a living just like you are. And my kids are home, just like your kids. I'm in the same exact situation you are. In fact, you own your own business. I don't. Okay, I don't have an income source. I do have a source of income. He says, who's your source of income? This is Hashem. He says, I never believed that my income came from the travel agency, from my boss. But I knew this, I had to go through the motions and remind myself that there's a solution that the prophets talk about all the time. He says, well, what's the solution? He says, the solution is Bitachon. We are in good hands. And then it got the all clear siren. They both left. Shimon didn't want to continue the conversation. But let's take a look at these two friends. They're both in the same exact situation. They got no money. They got the same, dealing with the same kids at home and the same corona, the same pandemic. And one is all uptight and upset. And to add everything on it, they're in a bomb shelter. The bombs are falling outside. And the other one is an even keel. Is an even keel. So how much emotional wear and tear is Shimon having? Shimon is a candidate for cardiac problems. He's a candidate for an ulcer. His digestion is probably not so great. And Reuven is going through, it's not going to change what's going to happen. Everything is going on just the same, but Reuven is going through life so much more smoothly. Why? Because Reuven has Bitachon. Reuven was not born in Bitachon. Reuven learned Bitachon, and we're going to learn Bitachon just like he did. Now, our new lesson, tonight's lesson, and the next series, it's probably going to be, my estimate, maybe 8 or 9 lessons for us to cover Bitachon. Okay, we're going to learn all about it. And this, people ask, what's Bitachon? I said, trust in Hashem, security, your personal security. But I call it the master's degree program in Emunah. We learned the 13 principles of Emunah. That was the bachelor's. Now, the Bitachon is actually the master's degree in Bitachon. Why? In Emunah. Why? Okay, imagine a BA and an MA, bachelor's degree and a master's degree. Okay, not everyone that has a bachelor's degree has a master's degree, but everyone that has a master's degree has a bachelor's degree, because you have to get a bachelor's degree before you get a master's degree. All right. The same thing with emuna in bitachon. Okay. Person has emuna. Okay. Not every person with emuna has bitachon, but every person with bitachon has emuna, because people ask, let's say, what is the practical definition of emuna? I mentioned before, it's trust, okay, or security, but really, bitachon is applied emuna. Applied emuna, particularly in financial matters and in health matters, when a person finds out that he lost a business deal, and he finds out that his stock went down, and he trades in foreign currency, and he finds out that the currency just made a big purchase, that went down. If he's got a clear heart and he knows it's come from Hashem, that is really, you know, that person's got emuna, because he's got bitachon. And if he's got bitachon that keeps him on an even emotional keel, then he's got emuna. But what gives him the secure feeling? A person gets a secure feeling when he or she knows that they're in Hashem's hands. That's it. You know, you're in Hashem's hands, not running the show. We're not really, everything is for Hashem. And we go back. This is applying our first principle of Emunah, that he alone did, does, and will do everything. Okay. Now, I want to qualify something. In the Gemara in Tractate Yevamot, on page 63b, the Gemara talks about a scholar named Ben Azai. There were two friends, Ben Azai and Ben Zoma, and they were what's called Tamid Chaverim. They were colleagues and students of Rabbi Akiva. Not just students, but colleague students, because they're on a very, very high level. Okay. Ben Zoma, I'm talking about Ben Azai, Shimon Ben Azai. It was a Mishnaic scholar, time of Rabbi Akiva, and the Gemara describes him as a person of pleasing sermons and pleasing deportment, or pleasing actions. Na'eh doresh u'na'eh mekayem. That he practiced what he preached. In other words, before he preached anything, he certainly practiced it. If he would talk about honesty, you could believe that he's honest. If he was talking about any law out of Torah, you could believe that he was impeccable in his observing that law. Okay, so I've got to make a little qualifier here and state, because I don't want it to be presumptuous that anybody thinks that, or even I think that I've got bitachon. I've been teaching Emunah for nearly 2 decades now, but I got to be honest with you. If the siren would go off now, my heart skips a beat. Then I get in operation mode. I still jump. Okay, my bitachon is not perfect. All right, so there are still things that worry me in the heart. I can't say that I'm a worry-free guy. There's still things that worry me. Okay, despite the fact my brain knows 100% that everything's for the best. My brain knows everything's from Hashem. Okay. But the longest distance in the world is not between Ashdod and Maui. It's between the brain and the heart. Okay. Even Laser's got to do a lot of work to get what his brain knows, get it down to the heart. Okay. So to fully confess that I'm preparing these new shirim one by one to strengthen my own bitachon. And I'm relearning Bitachon from ABC, okay? And I'm not teaching it, we're learning together. You, cherished sister, and you, cherished brother, are my learning partner, okay? We're learning this together, okay? Because I want to be on the level where my emotional default is that I'm in good hands and nothing worries me. I'm in good hands, and Emunah kicks in immediately, not kicks in after 2 seconds, not kicks in after 3 seconds. I would like to be at the point where my default reaction is Emunah and Bitachon. Because it's good for the health, that gives you a longevity. I want this to be your default also. So this is the purpose of our shirim, this is the purpose of our learning together, so that we don't have the slightest reason to forfeit self-composure. That even if we hear the seemingly worst news, which I hope we don't, always blessed, everybody gets every blessing, what seems to us. Reb Zusha, the Noam Elimelech's brother, he said, why do we say in our blessing, we ask Hashem to give us good loving kindness. So why good loving kindness? Loving kindness is good. Now, everything Hashem does is loving kindness. Everything is good. But Reb Zusha says to Hashem, give us good loving kindness, that your loving kindness, what you know is loving kindness, it should look good in our eyes. All right. And that the difficult soul corrections. This is what Reb Zusha said. He said everybody should have a great life. Okay, so that we are going to try and get rid of fear and worry in our lives. Okay, so you now declared cherished friends. You're my learning partners. Okay, and hopefully we're going to attain Bitachon together. So I pray for Hashem's guidance in both translating and explaining the teachings of our holy sages, because go back to really classic books like Untitled Duties the Heart, Rabbeinu Bachya, go back to our Rishonim, and they're not always, sometimes even go in Kabbalic sources. It's not easy. And all the things you see there, my translations, I don't rely on anybody else's translation, because a translation, you have to understand it. And before I translate something, I have to work on it, make sure I understand it. All right. So I pray to Hashem that we say, Shelo yitzei michshol tachat yedenu. Hashem, please help me. And I shouldn't make a mistake, not in translation, not in teaching. And if I do, Hashem, please, you atone for me. Okay. So now we're going to learn the definition of Bitachon, the practical definition. This is a almost 1,000-year-old definition by Rabbeinu Bachya. There were two Rabbeinu Bachyas. One was Rabbeinu Bachya ben Asher. He wrote a commentary on the Torah, famous, and he also wrote another book called Katakemach. And the other was Rabbeinu Bachya ibn Pekuda. He wrote the Chovot Lavot, the Duties of the Heart. This is a classical book of service of Hashem. Okay. So now, in the introduction of our definition, I'm going to give a standing on one foot definition. Put it this way, because standing on foot definition. Okay, but what's Bitachon? Security in the Almighty. Security in the Almighty. Not trust, there's security. Security is even more than trust. When you feel secure. When you feel secure. Trust, you can trust someone. All right, you can trust someone. In other words, you trust your commander that he knows what he's doing when you go into battle, but you don't feel secure. Now, people shooting at you all around. Okay, security is even more. Security is we know there's light weapons fire and a guy's inside a tank. He's well protected. He feels secure inside the tank. Okay, so security is even more than trust. When a person feels secure in Hashem, secure with Hashem. Okay, that might be fine for the dictionary, but it's not good enough for a worry-free heart. If I tell you that Bitachon is security Hashem, hey, Rabbi Lezer, you haven't taken away my worry yet. Okay, so now we're going to try and take away the worry with defining what Bitachon is. Okay, so in Duties of the Heart, Chovot Lavot, Rabbeinu Bachya, he defines Bitachon. Okay, first I'm going to give a mouthful, then we're going to break it down. Okay, the classic definition of Bitachon. Listen to this. Tranquility of the soul, whose heart leans on he whom he trusts, on Hashem, who will always do what's good and befitting. In other words, that soul trusts that Hashem will always do what's good and best for him. Befitting, Rabbeinu Bachya, means what's best. For whatever the matter is, in other words, whatever situation is, Hashem will do the best for you. And the person, he or she trusts the one, capital zero, the one he or she leans on. Because, why do they lean on them? Because the one has the knowledge and the ability to do whatever is best and befitting. That definition is right out of chapter 1 and the gate of Bitachon in Chovot Lavot, in Duties of the Heart. Okay, so it's a mouthful and it's very cryptic because you're talking about even the Hebrew is medieval Hebrew and translated from the Arabic and then translated in English. It's very, that was a word-to-word translation. Okay, now what I did now is I took apart Rabbeinu Bachya's definition and split it into 3 parts that we're going to explain. Okay, Rabbeinu Bachya's classic definition, you just learned classic definition of Bitachon from Duties of the Heart. It's very cumbersome to the English ear. So we're going to break it down 3 parts. Part number 1, this is the 3 parts of Bitachon. Part number 1, tranquility of the soul. Part number 2, the name of tonight's lesson, leaning on Hashem. Part number 3, that Hashem has the knowledge and the ability to do what's best and good for you always. Nobody's in Hashem's way. Nobody can block Hashem. Hashem wants to bring you, you think you don't have an income? Hashem wants to bring you $5 million in another 2 minutes. You got $5 million. The doctors say a person has a terminal disease. Hashem wants to give a clean bill of health in a moment. Hashem could do it. We go to the Emunah, and this is not hippie Emunah. This is not Lucy in the sky with diamonds Emunah. We go with the simple Emunah that Hashem can do whatever he wants, whenever he wants. And that's it. Okay, so if we have a difficulty in life, we know that Hashem can do whatever he wants, whenever he wants. But if Hashem is perpetuating the difficulty, then we have something to correct. This is why we do soul searching every day. We do our session with Hashem, and we said, okay, Hashem, what am I supposed to learn from my particular situation? Hashem, what do I learn from a problem A? You plug in your problem. What do I learn from? Plug in, every person plug in your own problem. Okay, this is a template. So once again, our 3 areas of Bitachon that Rabbeinu Bachya describes as the first, tranquility of the soul. Bitachon is going to bring you tranquility of the soul. Nothing else will bring tranquility of the soul. Deep tranquility of the soul. And this is simple. No substance, no nothing. If a person has a lot of money, if it's going to be, we're going to lose sleep, because then the money can, you have something to lose. It's something that, sure, poor people sleep night better than rich people. You should know that. Okay, people are envious of rich people. Rich people don't have it easy. Okay, but tranquility of the soul only comes since the soul is a tiny part of the Almighty. The connection, the absolute connection with the Almighty, and Bitachon is even a stronger connection than Munah, because we said some masters, it's supercharged to Munah. Okay, that's going to give a person peace of the soul. Second, leans on Hashem. He's not dependent on the doctor. He's not dependent on the lawyer. He's not dependent on the CPA. He's not dependent on the real estate agent that sells his house. He's dependent on Hashem. Now, he knows he's functioning in this world, and he has to do hishtadlus, an effort. We're going to have a whole separate shiur on hishtadlus. It's one of the biggest questions that people ask. How much effort should I do? How much do I need to work? How many doctors do I need to go to? Do I need to go to the doctor at all? Okay, we're going to have a whole separate shiur on hishtadlus because it's very important. But now we're defining Emunah. Okay, so the second is leaning on Hashem. The third part, that Hashem has the knowledge and ability to do what's best and befitting always. Okay, now let's take each of these 3 points and break them down into finer details so we can understand them better. All right, the first of Rabbeinu Bachya's 3-part definition of Bitachon is tranquility of the soul. Now, if you've ever heard of the Alter of Novardok, the Alter of Novardok was Rabbi Yosef Yozel Horovitz. He lived in the 19th century between 1847 and he died in 1919, the beginning of the 20th century. He writes, he was a classic Musar rabbi, a classic ethics rabbi. He was a student of Rabbi Yisrael Salant, who founded the ethics movement. And he was the head of what's called the Novardical school. One of my grandfathers was a student of the Alter of Novardok, the Rebbe Novardok. Okay, they call him in Hebrew the Saba Novardok, the grandfather of Novardok. Alter in Yiddish, the elder of Novardok. He writes, the tranquility of the soul is the indication of Bitachon. Okay, if you find a person you want to know, oh yeah, I got Bitachon, I trust in Hashem. All right, if we could measure like a seismograph, put a seismograph on a person's pulse or a person's soul and see how active it is, or see how calm it is, that this measure of tranquility of the soul, according to the Alter of Novardok, this is the manifestation, the indication of Bitachon. Okay, the person with Bitachon, according to his definition, must never lose self-composure. It must never worry, never be afraid. Lose everything from Hashem. And that's why I say the default. Okay, something happened to me today where I was in the middle of something, real deep concentration, and something took me out of concentration. I was upset. I was upset. It took me about 2-3 seconds to get back. Okay, sure. But my default reaction, I was upset. That's not Bitachon. Laser, come on, baby. You got to improve the Bitachon. See, we're learning together. I need to learn it just as much as you do. Okay, we're learning together. I'm not teaching, not learning. We are learning together. I stress this, we're learning together. Okay, and when we're learning, one thing about learning is be very careful not to miss a single word. And to teach what we're learning, we want to be very careful that we understand things 100%. Okay, so the Altar of Nirvana says that we have to have a tranquil soul, and a tranquil soul means no worry and no fear and no loss of self-composure. In other words, we never get angry. We never yell at people. We never get upset. We never make a frown, a bad face, because we never feel bad. Okay. The Gemara Tractate Brachos, it tells a story. Turn to Tractate Brachos, page 60a, the first side of page 60, and sees a story about Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Yishmael is walking down the street, and he sees one of his students. And Rabbi Yishmael is also a contemporary of Rabbi Akiva. In fact, they argue back and forth all through the Mishnah. Okay, but Rabbi Shmuel is walking down the street. Rabbi Shmuel was a tremendous high level. All these sages that were mentioning, they could revive the dead. They would begin to understand the level they were on. So he's walking down the street and he sees one of his students. One of his students was also a Mishnaic sage, okay, generation behind him. And he says to him, you must be a sinner. What are you talking about? It's a student, a holy student. And Rabbi Shmuel looks him in the eyes and says, you must be a sinner. He says, what do you mean? What do you mean? He was upset. Rabbi Shmuel said, the prophet Isaiah said, that the sinners of Zion are afraid. Okay. The one thing you can recognize in Zion is Jerusalem, Yerushalayim, time of Beis Hamikdash, that person was fear, he was a sinner. He says, okay, so if you look like you're afraid and you're upset, you must be a sinner. But in the Maharal of Prague was a great Mekubal, and he lived in the 17th century, end of the 16th century. He writes that fear is the opposite of security. And he says a person that feels secure doesn't fear. Fear and security, they're mutually exclusive. And King Solomon says this right out. If we open up the book of Proverbs, Mishlei, chapter 29, Proverb 25, what does King Solomon say? He says, a person's fear brings him down, but his trust in Hashem uplifts him. Words of King Solomon, the wisest man that ever walked the face of the earth, that a person's fear brings him down, and his trust in Hashem lifts him up. So if a person wants to lift himself up, he trusts in Hashem, and he right away feels trust. You can see this. You can see your own posture. Think, I love Hashem, I trust Hashem, everything is fine. Oh, and things are, they're not good. And right away a person, he loses posture. You could see literally with your own eyes that fear brings you down and trust brings you up. Bitachon gives a person the measure of personal security. We're not even fearful tidings. They don't faze him. They don't bother. He says his self-composure. Okay, so in the jargon of King David, what he says in Psalm 112, King Solomon's father, King David expresses the same thought when he says, he shall not be afraid of evil tidings. His heart is steadfast, trusting in Hashem. So King David says that this is his indication, like we learned from the Navardic or the Altar Navardic. King David says, steadfast heart, that's composure, that's inner peace, steadfast heart, where heart doesn't skip a beat. Like I said at the beginning, you hear the bomb siren, your heart skips a beat. King David, if he would hear a bomb siren, his heart wouldn't skip a beat. He had perfect bitachon. Okay, we continue the distinction of fear. If we look in the writings of the Rambam's son, it's called Rabbi Avram, the son of the Rambam. He writes that a person should not be afraid of fear-causing elements. Why? How can you say not be afraid? Not be afraid of the bombs, not be afraid of terrorists, not be afraid of the stock market crash, not be afraid of all types of things. He makes a distinction. He says, why are you fearing the object? Fear, Hashem, who sends the object to the world, that wants Hashem does that because he wants us to correct something. So this is interesting. He says, fear Hashem because Hashem uses them as agents of correction. Or if it's an evil person, agents of punishment. Okay, so King David says, he says again, Psalm 50, the Psalms are all full of bitachon, full of trust in Hashem. Open up Psalm 56. King David says, in the day that I am afraid, this is King David's humility. He says, in the day that I am afraid, I will trust you. In other words, I'll work on my trust. King David says about himself. In other words, the more there's a reason to fear, what's King David saying? The more there's a reason to fear, the more he's going to trust Hashem. King David had enemies, unbelievable enemies. They were stronger than the Israelites and stronger than the bigger armies and stronger soldiers. Didn't care. King David had every single problem. Can't even imagine the whole list of King David's problems. But with what we learned from King David, now I'm going to teach you, turn this into a little mathematical equation. Write this down and put it on your refrigerator. Maybe make a magnet out of it and put it on the refrigerator. Okay, listen to this. We've got two sums. We've got a sum of bitachon and we've got a sum of fear. Okay, so the more bitachon exceeds fear, the greater one's tranquility of the soul. All right? The more bitachon, let's say my right hand is bitachon, my left hand is fear. As bitachon goes up and fear goes, then the tranquility level goes up. When bitachon, the more bitachon is stronger than fear, then a person's tranquility. Oh, but the opposite works. Conversely, the more fear exceeds bitachon, heaven forbid, then the greater one's emotional turmoil. So if a person is in emotional turmoil, for some reason, emotional turmoil, something seemingly bad happens, hold it. Now what you do, don't grab the phone, don't call this one or that one, and don't panic. It might be bitachon. Start right away reading about bitachon, and remember that Hashem does everything. And as Hashem does everything, remind yourself, and maybe go back and review the first principle of Munah, and your bitachon, your trust in Hashem, your leaning on Hashem will become greater. Okay, so that's, remember, the higher the bitachon, the lower the fear. The lower the bitachon, the higher the fear. The higher the bitachon, the more the inner peace. The lower the bitachon, the less the inner peace, and the more the inner turmoil. Okay, that's our relationship. So it's bad enough that fear doesn't upset bitachon, but leads to inner turmoil that actually triggers a person, the thing that the object person is afraid of. Okay, so it's bad enough that a person suffers. Okay, he's got fear. But by fear, it's even worse. Because look what Job writes. If you open up the 3rd chapter of Job, verse 25 and 26, Job says, and he had big problems. Job said, the very thing I feared came upon me, and that which I was afraid of overtook me. And I'll tell you a true story. I had a person I knew was deathly afraid of this. He had a friend that died of a terrible type of cancer. And my friend was so afraid of that, he found out that capsicum, the oil of hot peppers, was good against this particular type of cancer. So what he did, he made a garden, and for the next 12 years, he ate the hottest peppers he could get hold of. Hot peppers. If it's somebody else, it would burn out their insides because he was so afraid. At the end of 12 years, he came down with the same type of cancer. And he himself told me this story, and I went to visit him before he left the world. He said to me, Laser, I got the very thing I was afraid of. And I see that's right there in Job. When fear overtakes a person, okay, then it actually creates a spiritual source that brings the object of the fear in the world. Because in that vein, the Maggid Duvnov says the same thing. He says the more a person fears something, the more he literally invokes the object of his fear. Okay, so therefore, bitachon is the root of salvation. We have bitachon, and we say, look, it's all from Hashem. It's we don't fear anything. Then it keeps, okay, if a person is afraid of the IRS and afraid of an audit, he's raising his chances he's going to get audited. But he says, no, Hashem doesn't want them to bother me. They're not going to bother me. I'm honest anyway. He's not worried about it. Okay, he's increasing his chances that he won't get audited. Same thing with income. Same thing with health. Everything. So nothing brings a person a great night's sleep. Put your head on the pillow, and by the time you count to 10, bye-bye. Okay, that's what bitachon does. because it frees a person's heart from worry and frees a person's brain from fear. Okay. King David, where did he learn Bitachon for? He was watching a baby. He looked at a baby in a mother's bosom. And King David writes in Psalm 131, verse 2, he says, I'm like a baby. He says, I'm still and my soul is tranquil like a baby in its mother's bosom. It's King David. Kigmul alai imo. This is the ultimate state of tranquility where a person attains by putting his or her total trust in Hashem. And that's security. Okay, so trusting Hashem exclusively, it not only rewards a person with inner peace, but it brings happiness as well. Because King David in Psalm 33, he says, because our hearts rejoice in him, we have trust in his holy name. In other words, we trust, we get happiness. Happiness, we get trust. They work together. Okay, so that's the first section. That is the inner peace, the inner tranquility. The second section of our definition is leaning on Hashem. So this is the second part of Rabbeinu Bachia's three-part definition, Bitachon. It's the element of leaning on Hashem. Leaning on something means total trust. Okay, if you lean on, I got this Mount Arbel behind me, so I'm leaning on the mountain. You're leaning on the mountain. I'm not worried that the mountain is going to move out of the way and I'm going to fall down. Like if you're leaning on a wobbly chair or something like that, leaning on a mountain. You got to imagine. If you're leaning on a mountain, you're not worried that the mountain's going to move. Okay, it's Hashem. That's what we call Hashem. Sul. King David says, Hashem is my rock. Hashem is my boulder. Hashem is a mountain. Okay, so we lean on something that's strong as a mountain and we have no fear. Okay, Isaiah uses the term leaning. Where do we get the leaning from? Leaning, Isaiah says it in chapter 50. He says, let a person trust in the name of Hashem and lean on his God. Lean on Hashem. Okay, lean on Hashem. So indeed, leaning on Hashem is the precondition of Geula, the full redemption of the people, according to Isaiah. Isaiah writes that before we have Geula, people have to learn to lean on Hashem because he prophesizes, he says, the day will come when the remnant of Israel and the survivors of Jacob shall no longer lean on those who struck them. Wow, is that prophetic? I'll tell you what it means in a moment. They shall lean on the Holy One of Israel in truth. How about Germany after World War I? People said, yeah, Jews, you got to worry. In Germany in 1933, when Hitler came to power, and Hitler's National Socialists, the Nazi Party, came to power, and asked the Jews, oh, no, we're Germans. We're Germans first. And then they were Jews. We're German Jews. They were very intellectual and secular. Whoa, this is the prophecy of Isaiah. The prophecy of Isaiah. They leaned on Germany, and Germany ended up they're destroying them. This is the ones who struck them. Okay, you look all over the world. In the UK, in America, in Belgium, in France, all the anti-Semitism on the rise, on the rise, on the rise. And how many people speak to, oh no, I don't want to make Aliyah, I don't want to come to Israel. I'm American, I'm French, I'm British, I'm this, that, you plug in that thing. This is what Isaiah's talking about. Isaiah's talking about. We have to lean on Hashem. Lean on Hashem. That's the first thing. Rabbeinu Yonah writes in his elaboration of Proverbs that leaning on Hashem in truth means total reliance without the slightest doubt. Because this is what Isaiah said. And the last two words I forgot to say. Isaiah said is when we lean on the Holy One in truth. In truth. Okay, so Rabbeinu Yonah says that in truth means total reliance. Total reliance. Okay, completely leaning on Hashem. That's it, leaning on Hashem. Okay, we have the Holy Al-Sheikh. The Holy Al-Sheikh was Rabbi Moshe Al-Sheikh. He lived in the beginning of the 16th century, and he was born in Europe, and then he came to Tzfat. He was delivering a sermon on Shabbat in the morning, and a simple wagon driver was listening to a sermon. And in that sermon, the Holy Al-Sheikh, Rabbi Moshe Al-Sheikh, he said that anyone who completely leans on Hashem doesn't have to make an effort to make a living, makes effortless living. So the wagon driver, he took that sermon at face value, word for word. He says, if the Holy Rebbe said it, then that's true. That's the Al-Sheikh. They're talking about the same generation as the Arizal, as Rabbi Yosef Karo, the giants of Tzfat. Okay, so the wagon driver, he decided that after Shabbat, he would not go back to work. And he's going to sit home and he's going to say Psalms all day long. Right. Well, shortly after, he received this huge sum of money. Where from, I don't know. That wasn't in the story where he got his money from. But the Holy Alshech students, they were all tremendous Kabbalists and what? Each of them prodigious Torah scholars. They asked the Alshech, they said, how can a simple wagon driver be better than us? Here, we learn Torah all day long and we're immersed. We get up at midnight to make midnight lamentations and the Tikkun Chatzot, all prayer, and he put all day long, and we're in poverty. And a simple wagon driver, he says, he stops working, says Tehillim, and boom, that's it. Well, the Alshech said, you know why? That simple wagon driver has simple emunah, innocent emunah. He believes in what his rebbes say. Okay, so his emunah is like cultivated soil. If you take cultivated soil and take all the rocks out that's been well cultivated, you drop a seed on there, it's going to grow. But he said to his students, from that one seed that could grow to be this mighty tree. That's Bitachon. That's for his true emunah that led to Bitachon, and he got this big sum because it grew into a big tree of abundance from Hashem. But he says, but you guys, your field isn't cultivated. You're full of intellectualism and kashas. You're asking questions all the time and full of doubts. And one thinks he's smarter than the other and more intellectual than one another. And your simple emunah needs a lot of improvement. And the wagon master, he relies totally on Hashem. And you, my esteemed students, do not. And that's the difference. So we see, according to the Alshech, doubt and Bitachon are mutually exclusive. Where you have Bitachon, you don't have doubt. Where you have doubt, there's no Bitachon. It's either one or the other. The same generation as the Alshech, Rabbi Chaim Vital, who was a student of he was not only a student of the Arizal, before he was a student of the Arizal, he was a student of the Alshech. Okay, and then he became the foremost disciple of the Arizal. He writes that Bitachon means leaning on Hashem wholeheartedly without the slightest doubt. So we have not only leaning, but without the slightest doubt. Okay, so how does a person attain? Okay, well, stop, time out. Nicely said. How do we attain it? How does a person attain the level of Bitachon where he or she totally leans on Hashem and relies on nothing else? We get the answer from the Baal Tanya. If we open up the Tanya, the very first chapter in Shar Yichud Namuna, that the Baal Tanya, Rabbi Shneir Zalman of Ladi, he was the first Chabad Rebbe. He lived from the end of the 18th century, beginning of the 19th century. He died in 1812, time of Napoleon. Okay, he writes that a person must have total emunah in divine providence. Remember when we learned our 10th principle of emunah, we learned all about divine providence. Okay, so if you want to go back and review that, our 10th principle of emunah, but when a person has total emunah in divine providence, knowing that everything comes from Hashem, every single move, and is cognizant that Hashem alone sustains all of creation, it's not your boss, it's not the American government, it's not the British government, it's not the Israeli government, it's not whether you get subsidy payments or not. Okay, it's all from Hashem. So this degree of spiritual awareness, where you believe in divine providence, and you hold by divine providence, and you know that everything is from Hashem, this enables a person to lean on Hashem entirely. These are the words of Baal Tanya. So our emunah in divine providence, it shows that we believe that Hashem alone determines what happens in the world. Nobody else determines what happens in the world. It's Hashem alone. Okay, for Hashem is the only one. If Hashem makes all the decisions and Hashem decides what's going to be, then Hashem is the only one to turn to. We turn to Hashem, and people make mistakes by turning to other things. Okay, you call your lawyer, call the doctor, call the realtor, but before you do, ask Hashem. Hashem, send me the right shaliach, send me the right emissary. Hashem, this is what my brain tells me on my spiritual level. Or you ask your spiritual guide, ask your rabbi, what should I be doing? Okay, and your rabbi that knows you well enough, you say, this is what you need to do. You need to call this guy or not call this guy, or just say a couple of, your rabbi will give you, he'll coach you. That's why everyone needs a spiritual guide, because a person can't always be objective and opposed to himself or herself. So we shall have a spiritual guide. I have, but when I'm in doubt, I ask my spiritual guide to Melitzer Rebbe. Sure. Okay, everyone, we all need to have a spiritual guide. Okay, so the more a person has belief, strong belief in divine providence, that there's no one else to turn to and no one else wields power, that there's nothing but him, ein od milvado. We say all the time, nothing but him. Deuteronomy 4, verse 35, ein od milvado. There's no one but Hashem. Okay, now we're going to learn the third part of our definition. This is the third of Rabbeinu Bachia's three-part definition of Bitachon, that Hashem has the knowledge and ability to do what's best and befitting always. Befitting is beneficial, but the best thing in this situation, what Hashem is doing for each of us, despite what seems the best thing for us. Tell you a story, Ramat Beit Shemesh. Ramat Beit Shemesh, a family with their 6 children in their brand new family vehicle. What do they call it? I forgot what they call it, the 3 initials, but the family vehicle. Okay, their brand new car, and father and a mother and 5 or 6 children. Boom, head-on collision. Well, they got the airbags, everybody's fine, except for one of the kids. The 7-year-old son had a massive concussion. Everybody came out with unscathed. The car was a total loss, but the 7-year-old son has a massive concussion. They rush him to the emergency room and they do a CAT scan on his head. And what do they find? Oh, wow. They find a growth pressing on his brain. This was something new, and they right away do emergency brain surgery and they take that growth out. Okay, so the family lost a new car. Everybody came out great. Now, ask in retrospect, they got their son back with a clean bill of health. Now, was that car accident good or not? If the son would have waited until he gets blurry vision or headaches, the little 7-year-old boy doesn't always know how to express himself, it might have been too late. The fact that Hashem made this happen was to get them in. They wouldn't ever think of having their son do a CAT scan on his head, having his son see a neurologist. Yeah. But Hashem runs the world. It's a great thing. I heard this right from the mother. She came to one of my Emunah lessons in Ramat Beit Shemesh before the Zoom days, and she told me this lesson. I heard that lesson before, and she says, Rabbi Lezer, I'm the mother. This was my family. This is my family, and Abu Hashem. And see stories like this all the time, where we think something is seemingly bad, and Hashem does it all for the best, beyond what we could think of, because Hashem sees everything. All right, so Hashem has the knowledge and the ability to do what this. Now, what does it mean when Rabbeinu Bachia tells Hashem has the knowledge, that he's omniscient, he sees and knows everything, and the ability, and he's all powerful? So this is basically the third part of the definition. We depend on Hashem's omniscience, and he's all powerful. And if you read 3 words of Emunah, one thing it tells you, who is this Hashem that we lean on and we believe in? He's my beloved Father in heaven. You're my Father in heaven. My Father is much more loving than I am to my kids, and even the most loving Father to his children and grandchildren. Hashem's much more, 1,000,000 times more. So Hashem is always going to do what's best for each of us. And Hashem is the only one that's capable of getting the job done, capable of doing what we need in our lives. And we don't understand all the time what we need, because Hashem has a plan for us. We all may not necessarily know what our soul correction in this world is. So inherent in our third part of the definition is Hashem knows what's beneficial for each of us better than we do. Remember, Hashem knows what's good for each of us better than we do. And this is a prerequisite to trust. A person can't trust Hashem if he thinks he knows better than Hashem. Because if a person thinks he knows better than Hashem, he's going to have all types of things that scare him or scare her. Okay, so unless a person knows that whatever Hashem does, it's all for the best with no exceptions, and it's all for their ultimate good, they're not going to be able to trust in Hashem. So that's why Emunah is a prerequisite for Bitachon. So a person without that Emunah, that Hashem is doing everything for the best, and Hashem is omniscient, Hashem is all powerful, is going to be prone all the time to anxiety, to fear, and to worry. So Rebbe Kiva says that a person should always say, Rebbe Kiva in the Gemara Tractate Brachos, Kol mai derachmana avid l'tavid. Everything Hashem does, it's all for the very best. Now, if a person thinks Okay, that attitude is voluntary. Okay, guys, pious, he thinks up to their best. Look in the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, Orach Chaim, chapter 230, clause 5, codifies it, begs to differ. It says, believing that Hashem does everything the best is obligatory. We are required. So now that we have all parts of Rabbeinu Bachia's classic definition of Bitachon, they come together like well-meshed gears in a smoothly running machine. So when a person knows that Hashem is omniscient and all-powerful, he or she readily leans on Hashem. And leaning on Hashem is total reliance that leads to tranquility in the world. That's it. Perfect.